The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this episode are that of the guest and host and do not necessarily reflect the values of sponsors or other associated organizations. Welcome to the Parental Compass presented by Family Education and Support Services. I am your host, Bobby Williams. If you like the content that we're producing, be sure to hit subscribe. That way, every week when we drop a new episode, you're going to get notified. You're going to know about it. A lot of people think about foster care or they think about adopting, and they're hit with these feelings of fear and anxiety. And oftentimes, feelings like fear and anxiety, they come from the unknown. Today, I'm going to speak with someone who has actually done it. Dustin DeVries was a foster parent who then adopted two children. They're ages 11 and 12. And what I appreciated about this conversation is that Dustin explained the full scope of everything. He talked about the process, he talked about the challenges, but he also talked about the successes and the real impact that it's had on his life. So I think you're going to get a lot from this conversation. Let's check it out.
We decided, well, after we got married, let's take a few years just to get to know each other well and kind of establish our life, set this trajectory, and then we'll start thinking about having kids. We kind of went through that process, and then we're like, all right, now it's time to start down this path. We're ready. I don't know if you're ever completely 100% ready to have kids, but we felt like we were, and then we were just having a lot of issues with that. It wasn't working out, so we started looking at different options to see what would work for us, and pursuing avenues through science, things. We started to get into talking about things like in vitro fertilization and those sort of things. And I think as we started getting into that, you start looking at the cost, you start looking at all the different things that are involved, and you start thinking, well, in the back of your mind, at least for us, we're sitting there thinking there's a lot of kids that are in need, a lot of situations where there's kids who don't have homes. And so we started thinking about that. We started consulting with some others that were close to us. We are spiritual. So in our case, we talked to one of our pastor at church about some of our concerns. And, we never had anyone really try to force an agenda on us or go down a certain path. It's just as we started exploring the different avenues, it was like, this is something we feel called to. We felt like it was something we wanted to go and pursue. And so we did. Yeah. And the journey, once we sort of opened our hearts to that, I think a lot of doors really opened for us, and it felt like a really natural thing, whereas the path we were on didn't feel natural. And I think I'm a firm believer that there was like a purpose behind this and the decisions that we made. And I think it was up to us as individuals and as a married couple to figure out what that purpose was, and I think we found it.
Yeah. Well, the word I was thinking as you were speaking was calling, and you said that. And yeah, that's just interesting how you had some exposure to it through your family, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. I know the licensing process can be super daunting for people. What was your experience like, or was there anything that surprised you about all of it?
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise. There's all the things that I think a lot of the foster parents like to joke about, and we look back with sort of fond memories, kind of chuckle about, once we get past
Maybe
it.
Now that it's in the past. Yeah.
In the past, yeah. But when you're going through it, it's a little weird. For example, when our kiddos came to live with us, they were 7 months and 2 years old. And, we lived in a 2-story house, and we had to post evacuation routes on the first and second floor of our home. Mm-hmm. And it seems kind of weird. It's like, yeah, our kids can't read. They're too young to, like, what is this actually accomplishing? There's other things like, making sure if you have like a bag of potato chips, it's like one day expired, it goes in the trash. If they come and do the home study, any kind of home audit kind of thing, and they find expired food, that's, a no-no. And a lot of these things, I think everyone's kind of realistic about it. Like when they come in, it's not like you're getting penalized, and it's like, well, you got to fix this, you're going to the back of the line kind of thing, right? It's one of those things. It's the policy. And I think when I started to look at all of that sort of stuff that came up, and I started looking at it through the lens of just litigation and like the liability that's involved, because the state's having to intercede because there's a parent or parents here that are not meeting the basic needs of their children. But that doesn't mean they've completely relinquished all of their rights to those children. It means that the kids are kind of in the state of limbo. And so the state is trying to manage what they need to do, plus also the liability side of things with, they don't want to take a kid out of a home and put them in a home that's even worse, right?
Yeah,
so,
sure.
And certainly, I mean, they're usually not coming out of the home, having slightly expired food is not quite the same as probably the conditions that they're coming from, but still, the state's just trying to mitigate liability. And I think you just had to kind of learn to live with that, just realize that's just part of the process.
Yeah, well, I'd rather them be more thorough than not thorough enough. And even though it's a long process, I mean, it probably makes you really think about the decision that you're making. Did you have any doubts going in, or ever second guessed yourself or anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody probably does. And, you start, I think for us, like once we were approved, we had, done all of the hours of training and everything that we needed to do. And we started getting calls for placements. You get some, it's difficult, because I can remember we got some calls about some initial placements that were kids that had like some very severe health issues and things like that. And it's hard to sit there and hear something like that. And then you sort of have, at least in our case, we would get a call about a placement, and then we'd have to make a decision like within, 5 minutes, 5 or 10 minutes about, is this, the right situation? So we're sitting there scrambling, like trying to figure it out. And also, unfortunately, there's no fortunate part of it. I don't think there were some that we said no to just because we saw it was a pretty extreme situation. And we didn't feel like, it felt like too much. But then you sit there and look back on that and think, wonder what happened to, this child that maybe we were called for, this other child that we were called for. And I mean, it's tough. I mean, there's, you kind of have to look at it as, at least I think this is how we looked at it, my wife and I, that we're doing something good. We're doing something to help. That doesn't mean that we need to take on every single challenge that possibly comes before us. We need to be realistic. We need to set ourselves up for success. And I think that's kind of what we tried to do. And, we ended up adopting 2 kids they were a younger sibling group. Not that they didn't have their own challenges, but fortunately when they came to us, pretty much healthy, and it was enough of a challenge that it did challenge us and push us, but it was a true blessing for us. But yeah, it's tough. It really is tough when you start getting the calls and you start having to think in the heat of the moment, like, well, yes or no.
5 minutes too. I mean, that's such a short amount of time to make a decision like that. I think just the state gets so overwhelmed, and so it's like if there's a resource, they got to plug it in as quick as they can.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's just kind of a symptom of society too, that there's not more of an emphasis and funds towards helping people like that.
I think you're probably right. And I think sometimes with that, they probably have a list that they're going through. And in our case, we went through you probably understand this better, Bobby, than I do, but the different types of agencies, this was more of a private placement agency. I mean, they worked with the state, but it was a faith-based organization. So, I think when they have a child or children that need to be placed, and they're spreading a net, to different agencies, and those agencies are reaching out. And so everyone's trying, everyone has good intentions. They're trying to find a placement. And so, in our case, it's like, well, if we sat on it for a day, to think about it and then get back, and then they got to go to the next person on the list. It's like, this is another
no,
day.
Someone else says no, and then it's 2 weeks later. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I think, at the end of the day, like for us, it was about when we got the call for our 2 kiddos, and we looked at each other, and I remember just like saying, I think this is the one. And, we said yes. And, certainly I'm sure if we would have like said yes, and, an hour later had a change of heart, we probably could have called back. But, at the end of the day, we knew what we were getting into, what we wanted to do. And all that training prepares you for all that. You're not blindsided by this necessarily, right? So
You're talking about faith. It's sort of like taking a leap of faith here, that it's like, I don't know how this is going to go, but we're going to try our best. I think a lot of parents get worried, adoptive parents or foster parents are worried about, did this child have a lot of trauma and how is that going to come up as they get older? What's your experience with all that, Ben?
I don't think there's any. I mean, I can't say, I can't quantify this in any way, but I can't imagine that there's any situation where a child doesn't have some level of trauma.
Yeah.
If they're coming from a home where maybe there are things going on the child wasn't exposed to. I mean, that's probably like the best case, right? Like maybe the parents were involved in something, or it could even be, something happened to the parents that for whatever reason, and now the child doesn't have parents anymore. So, there may not be necessarily trauma that they were experiencing every day of their lives, but there's still some kind of trauma just from being separated from their biological parents, right? And so I think that it's important to realize it's going to be the case every time. But one of the nice things is there are a lot of facilities available, as foster parents to be able to deal with that. There's plenty of resources. We never had a problem in terms of, as overworked as our foster agency was, we never had a problem being able to call them up.
Well, and I think just being like a consistent person there for them, and any child can have challenges, but seeing like what resources are in the community, because you're never alone. There's always someone you can reach out to, or something you can try, or something you can do. And I think as long as parents just don't feel trapped, they realize those resources are there, that's huge. Do they ask about their bio parents very much?
They do, and we've tried to not really hide things. I mean, we also don't know a lot as well. So we don't know the whole history. We know some things that we can share with them.
Yeah. Did they always know they were adopted? Like, because I know they were really little. Did you have like a time where you told them, or?
Yeah, no, I think we decided from the beginning just to be open and transparent about that, so that there wouldn't be like this time we had to sit down and like have the conversation, and I don't know that there's a prescribed way to handle that. That's how we felt comfortable handling it. We thought if we just made that natural as part of all this. And we also knew, because of, at some point they were going to reach an age, they realized, okay, well, I don't look like my parents. Something's wrong here. Like someone did clue me in on something. And we decided to take a more active approach of just doing that from the beginning and being open with them. And so that way we could have conversations about it. And like, our son, for example, he was 2 when he came to live with us, and we had to go through, for basically a year, go through visitation. That involved once every week, maybe once every other week, going and taking them to visitation with bio parents and bio family. And so, our son was old enough, he remembers his first dad and some of the things around that. So
would have been some proud moments for you through all this.
I mean, just seeing them grow, seeing them mature, seeing them achieve what they've achieved, seeing them overcome the obstacles that they had, and turn those from liabilities into assets, so to speak. Because I really believe his old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think that when you learn to deal with these things, and you realize you can survive the kind of trauma that they dealt with, we're always reminding them of that these things are things that I don't know if pride is the right word to be proud about. Proud that they were able to thrive despite those things that were up against them, but just being proud of themselves, and not to treat it as a handicap, or to adopt a victim mentality. Not that they aren't victims. I mean, if there's anyone in this world who's a victim, it's a young child who is thrown into a home that has such severe problems that the state needs to intervene and remove them from that home. If there's anyone in this world that's a victim, I can't think of anyone else who's more of a victim than someone who's put in that kind of mode. But if you can turn that into a strength And I think that's what has made us the most proud, is seeing them do that, seeing them excel at school, seeing them build friends, build lifelong friends, seeing them excel at sports or excel in art or music or whatever it might be. It's just been really powerful, I think, for us, and to see that change and know that we had a part in that and that we enabled them to achieve all these things, I think is huge.
Yeah. Do you think you've learned anything about yourself or your relationship with your wife through all this?
Oh yeah, without doubt. I mean, it's sort of the same thing of just learning to overcome and persevere. And I think the way I've lived my life, you have mentioned that a lot of this was, I think, we were inspired by our faith to make some of the decisions we made. And I think it's made me, it's reinforced that. And I don't know that, you don't necessarily have to be Christian or religious or anything. I think it's more about just feeling in tune with the world and wanting to feel inspired to do something bigger and to try to make a change in the world, but then also being willing to accept that we all have a purpose. And I really believe that, whether you're, religious or not, if you're an atheist, agnostic, whatever, I think you can still kind of think of life in terms of having a purpose in life.
Impact, yeah.
What's your impact? And I think that was huge to me, because when you kind of lead from that and you say, start to take this hands off, where it's like, I know this is my life, but maybe I'm not the one driving the car. Maybe I'm not the one, the conductor at the front of the train, right? Maybe I'm actually leaning on something else, whether it's a higher being or it's, something else in this world that's drawing me a certain way, using my skills and what I've developed over the course of my life to be able to help the world. And I'm going to be more passive and let the world sort of dictate what's the correct course to take, as opposed to having all this planned out in my head and saying, this is how I'm going to execute my life. This is what I'm going to do when I'm 30. This is what I'm going to do when I'm 35, 40, 45. Instead, being a little more flexible on that and open, at least, if nothing else. I think that's been huge for me, because then it's almost like it's sort of empowering. Sometimes you feel like you want to have control of your life, control everything that happens, which I get that. But if you can be more relaxed on that and allow, whatever it is, fate or whatever it might be, to kind of take over, there's something empowering about that, because then you feel like no matter what you're doing, no matter what situation you find yourself in, that you're at least trying to do the right thing. And I think that's huge.
Well, thank you for being here, Dustin. I know you're not doing it for the props, but it's an amazing thing to adopt, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. And I love everything you do on the podcast. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dustin. You think about, what is my impact on this world? What am I actually doing? And to adopt 2 children, that's a major impact right there. This has been the Parental Compass, presented by Family Education and Support Services. I'm Bobby Williams. I hope everyone has a great holiday. We'll see you next week. Peace.